The morning sunlight slanted through the blinds of Matt's home office as he sifted through Natalie's recent expenses. He wasn't the type to snoop, but her sudden shift in behavior had him unsettled. Her explanations for late nights at work and spa weekends with friends didn't add up. Matt had always trusted her, but trust only held firm until it was tested. As he stared at the credit card statement, a line item caught his eye. A booking at the Ocean Breeze Resort, miles away from the wellness retreat she'd mentioned. The charge was dated for the upcoming weekend. His chest tightened. Was this a business trip? No. Natalie had made no mention of work travel. His hands trembled slightly as he searched for more clues. He checked her social media, her texts, anything that could confirm or dispel his growing suspicions. While Matt wasn't typically one for drama, his loyalty to Natalie had earned her the benefit of the doubt. He needed proof before confronting her. Later that evening, Natalie strolled into the house, her smile as radiant as ever. "Dinner smells amazing," she chimed, peeking into the pot simmering on the stove. Matt forced a smile, his heart heavy with the knowledge he now carried. Watching her talk animatedly about her day felt surreal. Was she lying to his face? "I thought you were going to spend the weekend unwinding," Matt probed casually, masking his turmoil. Natalie hesitated, her polished facade cracking just slightly. "Oh, I am," she replied. "You know how stressful work has been. Some me time is exactly what I need." "You're going to be damned if you don't. I'll announce the resignation tomorrow." Matt nodded, his heart sinking further. He didn't press. Instead, he resolved to find out the truth himself. By Friday morning, Natalie packed her suitcase with an air of casual confidence. Matt feigned indifference as she kissed his cheek and breezed out the door. As soon as she was gone, he sprang into action. He checked the confirmation email he'd forwarded from their shared inbox, one he knew she hadn't noticed, and found the room details at Ocean Breeze. The drive was long but gave him ample time to reflect. The warmth of their early years together felt like a distant memory. Had he missed the signs of their unraveling? Or had Natalie always been this way, her charm concealing cracks he'd refused to see? As the resort came into view, its pristine beaches glistening under the sun, Matt's determination solidified. He parked discreetly and made his way inside, his athletic build and calm demeanor drawing no attention. It didn't take long to spot her. Natalie sat poolside, her laughter mingling with that of a younger man. A man Matt didn't recognize, but did need to. Matt stepped back, his jaw tight as he watched their interaction. The way she leaned toward the man, the intimate familiarity, it was unmistakable. But still, he did nothing. His rage simmered beneath the surface, but this wasn't the time to explode. He raised his phone and snapped a series of photos. He would gather all the proof he needed, carefully, methodically. Natalie's web of lies would collapse, not in a dramatic confrontation, but through the cold light of undeniable truth. In the coming days, she wouldn't just answer to him, she'd answer to everyone who mattered in their lives. The sound of waves crashing against the shore lingered in Matt's mind as he left the Ocean Breeze Resort parking lot. His phone buzzed in the passenger seat, Emma's name lighting up the screen. His sister's unwavering loyalty had been a source of strength through every challenge. For a moment, he debated picking up, but decided against it. He wasn't ready to share what he'd discovered yet. Instead, he drove to a nearby cafe, needing space to process what he'd seen. The images of Natalie and her lover, Ryan, played on a loop in his head. How long had this been going on? What excuses had he accepted without question? The sting of betrayal felt sharper with each thought, but his resolve strengthened. He couldn't let her lies define him. Matt ordered a coffee and sat in the corner pulling out his laptop. If Natalie wanted to gamble with their life together, she wouldn't just lose him, she'd lose the illusion of control she thought she had. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before he opened the first tab, a private investigator's website. He had gathered enough evidence for a confrontation, but to ensure Natalie couldn't squirm out of accountability, he needed a professional touch. He filled out a discreet form, detailing what he'd uncovered and what he needed: surveillance, further confirmation, and digital forensics. He sent the request with a grim sense of satisfaction. Natalie might have been reckless, but Matt wouldn't make the same mistake. By the time Natalie returned home Sunday evening, Matt had composed himself. He greeted her with practiced nonchalance, even helping her unload her suitcase. Her voice was effervescent, her laughter bright as she recounted stories about spa treatments and yoga classes that never happened. Every word was a reminder of the stranger she'd become, and every lie was another nail in the coffin of their marriage. "You seem so refreshed," Matt remarked, careful to keep his tone neutral. Natalie smiled, her eyes sparkling with the confidence of someone who believed she was untouchable. "That's the point of a retreat, isn't it?" she replied, brushing past him toward the kitchen. She hummed as she set a kettle to boil, completely unaware of the photos, screenshots, and recorded conversations Matt had amassed. That night, he stayed up late, unable to sleep. He opened his laptop and reviewed the footage he'd received from the investigator. Ryan was no random fling. This wasn't a moment of weakness. Natalie and Ryan were a carefully curated lie, woven into the fabric of her double life. One video showed them laughing at the resort's private cabana, her hand lingering on Ryan's arm. Another clip caught her leaning in close, whispering something into his ear. The way she looked at him, a mix of affection and exhilaration, was like a dagger to Matt's chest. That was supposed to be for him? Over the next week, Matt played his part flawlessly. He smiled when necessary, listened to Natalie's stories, and even suggested a date night, though the thought of being close to her made his stomach churn. It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance, it was strategy. Natalie needed to believe everything was fine so he could control the narrative. While Natalie worked late one evening, Matt sat with Emma in her living room, sharing everything he'd uncovered. His sister's green eyes burned with anger as she pored over the evidence. "Oh, she doesn't deserve your restraint," Emma snapped, slamming the folder shut. "You've given her too much credit. Looks like the—" Day in Emma's lap, Emma groaned slightly. Matt sighed. "I'm not protecting her, Emma. I'm protecting myself. The fallout has to be clean." Emma leaned back, arms crossed. "You're better than me. I'd have burned her life to the ground by now." "That's exactly what I'm doing," Matt said, his voice calm. "But I want it to last." Emma's lips curled into a small, approving smile. "She has no idea what's coming, does she?" By Friday, the stage was set. Matt had compiled every shred of evidence into a polished dossier. It wasn't just for him, it was for Natalie's family, their mutual friends, even her workplace if it came to that. Every secret message, every stolen moment, every lie, it was all there. That evening, Natalie entered the house with the same practiced smile she always wore. Matt met her gaze, holding her longer than usual. She hesitated, sensing something different. But he smiled and gestured toward the dining room. "Dinner's ready," he said simply. Natalie glanced at him suspiciously, but followed. She didn't see the envelope on the table until she sat down. "What's this?" she asked, her voice uneasy. Matt leaned back, his expression neutral. "Open it. You've been so honest lately, I thought I'd return the favor." As Natalie reached for the envelope, Matt watched the certainty drain from her face. Lies unravel slowly, but the truth hits all at once. Natalie's fingers trembled as she slid the envelope across the dining table. Her eyes darted between Matt's unreadable expression and the slim package that seemed heavier than it looked. "What is this?" she asked, forcing a nervous laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. Matt remained silent, his piercing green eyes fixed on her. He leaned back in his chair, hands clasped in his lap. The tension in the room was almost palpable, and, for the first time in years, Natalie felt genuinely unsure of herself. "Go ahead," Matt said finally, his voice even but cold. "You've always been good at getting to the heart of things. Open it." Natalie hesitated before pulling out the papers. Her confusion turned to panic as she scanned the first few lines. The photos of her and Ryan at the resort stared back at her like silent accusers. Screenshots of text messages, credit card charges, and surveillance timestamps painted a picture she couldn't deny. Her voice faltered. Matt, I don't, Matt interrupted sharply, his calm demeanor cracking for just a moment. Not another lie, not another excuse. I want the truth for once. Natalie opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come. She tried to summon the charm that had carried her through so many situations, but it felt useless against the weight of the evidence before her. I didn't mean. You didn't mean what? To get caught? His voice rose slightly, but he quickly reined himself in. You lied to me, Natalie. Over and over. And for what? Him? The disdain in his tone when he said him was unmistakable. Natalie winced as if the word itself was a slap. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she said softly, tears welling in her eyes. It just happened. It just happened. Natalie buried her face in her hands, but Matt wasn't moved. He had spent too many sleepless nights imagining this moment, replaying the scenarios in his mind. Now that it was happening, he felt nothing but a cold determination. You always said I was the practical one, he continued, his tone cutting. That I overthink everything. But you know what? That's what makes me good at seeing patterns, at connecting the dots. And you left a trail even a blind man could follow. Natalie looked up, her face streaked with tears. I love you, Matt. I never stopped loving you. Matt's laugh was harsh, bitter. Love? That's what you call this? Sneaking around behind my back, using my trust as a shield for your lies? That's not love, Natalie. That's selfishness. She shook her head, desperate to reach him. It wasn't like that. I was confused. I didn't know how to tell you that I felt lost. Lost? Matt's voice was sharper now. You felt lost. So instead of talking to me, your husband, you decided to build a second life with him? And you think I'm supposed to believe this is about confusion? Natalie's silence was answer enough. The excuses she had rehearsed seemed hollow in the face of Matt's fury. Matt stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. He picked up a second envelope from the sideboard and dropped it in front of her. What's this? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Matt's jaw tightened. That's a divorce petition. I've already signed it. All it needs is your signature. Natalie recoiled as if the papers had burned her. Matt, please, she begged, reaching out to touch his hand, but he stepped back. Don't, he said coldly. Don't you dare try to make me feel guilty for this. You did this, Natalie. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded. We can fix this, Matt. We can go to counseling. I'll end things with Ryan. Just don't do this. See, Matt's eyes softened briefly, but the weight of her betrayal crushed any lingering affection. You ended us the moment you decided to lie to me, he said quietly. This isn't about Ryan or the affair or even the lies. It's about trust, Natalie, and you destroyed it. Natalie sobbed into her hands, but Matt turned away. He couldn't bear to see her like this, not because he felt sympathy, but because he couldn't allow himself to waver. The next morning, Natalie woke to find the house eerily silent. Matt's side of the bed was empty, and his dresser drawers were open, the contents gone. Panic set in as she ran through the house, calling his name. It wasn't until she reached the living room that she saw the note on the coffee table. It was brief, direct, and devastating. I won't let your lies define my life. This is my goodbye. Her knees buckled as she clutched the note to her chest, the realization of her loss washing over her in waves. Meanwhile, Matt drove to a small lakeside cabin Emma had arranged for him. He didn't look back as he crossed the state line, leaving the house, the memories, and Natalie behind. I tried to resist closing my books. I can't bring them to work. For the first time in months, he felt a strange sense of peace. The storm was over. The wounds would take time to heal, but he knew one thing for certain. He would never allow himself to be blindsided again. Natalie had gambled everything and lost. Now Matt was free to rebuild a life defined by truth, not betrayal. and for the first time in years, he could finally breathe. Natalie sat on the couch, staring blankly at the divorce papers Matt had left behind. The weight of her choices pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Her phone buzzed beside her, but she didn't bother to look. It was probably Ryan, asking why she hadn't responded to his texts. She didn't have the energy to answer him, or anyone. Silence in the house felt oppressive. It was the kind of silence that only comes after something breaks irreparably. She ran her fingers over the edges of the papers, tears welling up again as the finality of it all sank in. She had gambled her life with Matt on a fantasy with Ryan, and now the illusion of having it all had shattered. Meanwhile, across town, Matt sat at Emma's kitchen table. His sister slid a steaming mug of coffee toward him, her green eyes filled with a mix of sympathy and pride. "I still can't believe you went through with it," she said softly, taking a seat across from him. "I mean, I knew you would, but seeing you like this, I'm proud of you, Matt." Matt nodded, wrapping his hands around the mug. He felt numb, as if the emotional toll of the past weeks had drained him completely. "I didn't think it would feel like this," he admitted. I thought I'd feel relief, or anger, or even satisfaction, but mostly I just feel empty." Emma reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "That's normal. You've just ended 15 years of your life with her. It's gonna hurt, even if she's the one who caused it." Matt sighed, staring into the coffee. Emma squeezed his hand gently. "You deserve someone who values your loyalty and honesty, Matt. Natalie made her choices. Now, you get to make yours." For Natalie, the fallout came in waves. Word of her affair and the divorce began to spread among their social circle. Matt, true to his word, hadn't hidden the truth. A carefully worded email sent to their closest friends and family outlined the situation without unnecessary drama. He explained the decision, shared the evidence, and closed by asking for privacy as he moved forward. At first, Natalie's phone lit up with calls and messages, some offering sympathy, others asking for details. She ignored most of them, unable to face the judgment she knew was coming. When she finally opened her social media accounts, the reactions were worse than she feared. Subtle but cutting comments hinted at her betrayal. Friends she'd known for years stopped responding to her messages. Invitations to events dried up. The life she'd carefully curated with Matt was crumbling, and for the first time she realized how much of it had depended on his steady presence. Even Ryan began to pull away. Their stolen weekends had been thrilling, but the weight of reality was something he hadn't anticipated. His coworkers whispered behind his back, and rumors began circulating at the office. His wife, having received the evidence Matt had shared, wasted no time in filing for divorce. Ryan's once confident demeanor cracked under the pressure, and Natalie saw a side of him she hadn't before, one that was selfish, evasive, and quick to blame her for the mess they were in. "Why did you have to tell him everything?" Ryan snapped during a tense phone call. "You should have controlled the situation better." Natalie's temper flared. "Me? You think this is my fault? You were just as involved as I was, Ryan. Don't you dare try to pin this on me." His silence was deafening. The cracks in their relationship were growing, and Natalie began to see that what they'd built was nothing more than a fragile illusion. Matt, on the other hand, was rebuilding. He took a leave of absence from work, using the time to reflect and reassess his priorities. The cabin Emma had found for him became his sanctuary. It was small and quiet, surrounded by towering pines and a serene lake. Each morning he took long walks to the woods, the crisp air helping to clear his mind. He also reconnected with people he hadn't spoken to in years, old friends, distant cousins, even a few coworkers he'd kept at arm's length while trying to juggle the demands of his marriage. One night, over beers with his college buddy Sam, Matt confessed, "I don't know who I am without her." Sam leaned back, giving him a thoughtful look. "You're the same guy you've always been, Matt. You just lost yourself in her for a while. But now..." Matt nodded, letting the words sink in. For the first time, he felt a flicker of hope. As weeks turned into months, Natalie's isolation deepened. Her relationship with Ryan disintegrated, and she found herself completely alone. She reached out to Matt once, leaving a voicemail filled with apologies and pleas for another chance. Matt listened to it only once before deleting it. The pain in her voice was real, but he knew better than to let it pull him back into the past. Instead, he focused on the future. He started therapy, finding solace in entangling the emotional knots left behind by Natalie's betrayal. He explored new hobbies, photography, kayaking, even cooking. Slowly but surely, he began to rebuild his sense of self. Natalie's world continued to shrink, while Matt's expanded in ways he hadn't imagined. He wasn't the same man he'd been before her betrayal, but that was a good thing. He was stronger, wiser, and more certain of what he wanted in life. By the time Matt finally returned to the city, he felt like a different person. As he walked through the familiar streets, he thought about everything he'd lost and everything he'd gained. For the first time in years, he felt truly free. Matt stepped into his home for the first time in months. The air was heavy with memories, but instead of the familiar sting of betrayal, he felt a surprising sense of closure. The once-in space no longer felt haunted. It was just a house now. Walls, furniture, and echoes of a life he no longer belonged to. Boxes lined the walls, filled with Natalie's belongings. She'd moved out weeks ago, leaving behind the pieces of their shared life that she no longer wanted. A photo album rested on the coffee table, a reminder of the years they had spent together. Matt flipped through it briefly, pausing on a picture from their honeymoon. They were smiling, carefree, standing on a beach with the sun setting behind them. For a moment, he let himself remember the good times before he closed the album and placed it in a box marked storage. This was the final act in the dissolution of their marriage, clearing out the remnants of their life together. Matt had chosen to keep the house, not out of sentimentality, but as a foundation for something new. He no longer saw it as a monument to their failure. It was a canvas waiting for him to rewrite his story. The following weekend, Emma arrived with a bottle of wine and a toolbox. "Ready to purge the past?" she asked with a grin, holding up a crowbar. "Is that you did it? Yeah. Matt laughed for the first time in what felt like ages. "What's the crowbar for?" Emma shrugged. "You never know. Maybe there's some hidden treasure or a bad painting Natalie picked out that needs prying off the walls." Together, they spent the day transforming the space. The living room, once filled with muted tones and Natalie's carefully curated decor, was now vibrant. Emma helped Matt repaint the walls in rich navy blue, a stark contrast to the beige Natalie had insisted on. "This feels like you," Emma said, stepping back to admire their work. By evening, the house felt lighter, more his. Emma raised her glass in a toast. "To new beginnings and learning to love your space again." "To new beginnings," Matt echoed, clinking his glass with hers. Natalie's presence still lingered in other ways, though. The divorce had left ripples across their social circles. Mutual friends had taken sides, and some had quietly distanced themselves from both of them. Matt didn't blame them. He had no interest in rehashing the past. Instead, he focused on fostering the connections that mattered most. Sophia, a longtime mutual friend, reached out one afternoon. "I heard you've been making some changes," she said, her voice warm. "I'd love to see the new place if you're up for it." Uh, Over coffee, they talked about more than just the house. Sophia confided how disappointed she'd been in Natalie, how shocked she was when the truth came out. "You deserved better, Matt," she said gently, "and I hope you know that." Her words struck a chord. For so long, Matt had questioned himself, wondering if he'd done something to push Natalie away. But Sophia's reassurance reminded him that the betrayal was never his fault. He'd been a good husband, as flawed and human as anyone, but he hadn't deserved what Natalie had done. As the months passed, Matt found himself thriving in ways he hadn't anticipated. Therapy helped him unpack the pain and rebuild his confidence. He took up photography, finding joy in capturing the beauty of everyday moments. His favorite subject became the lake near the cabin where he had found solace. Its still waters mirrored his newfound sense of peace. He also began dating cautiously, His first few attempts were awkward, filled with hesitation and second guessing, but eventually he met someone who made him feel at ease. A woman named Claire. She was kind, down to earth, and refreshingly honest. Their conversations flowed naturally, and Matt appreciated her openness about her own past. They bonded over their shared love of hiking and mutual understanding of starting over. Claire never pressed him about Natalie or the divorce. She didn't need to. Matt felt no urge to dwell on it either. He was looking forward, not back. Their relationship grew slowly, built on trust and mutual respect, qualities he now valued more than ever. Natalie, meanwhile, faced a much harder road. The life she had built with Ryan unraveled quickly. The thrill of their affair had faded under the harsh light of reality. Friends she had counted on turned away, and Ryan's support evaporated once the consequences of their actions became too much for him to bear. One day, Matt received an email from her. It was brief, apologetic, and filled with regret. She admitted that she had made a terrible mistake, that she missed him, and that she hoped he could someday forgive her. And what's crazy about that is, Matt read the email twice before closing it. Forgiveness, he realized, wasn't about erasing the past. It was about letting go of its hold on him. And he had already done that. He didn't respond. One evening, as Matt and Claire sat by the lake, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not for the pain, but for the growth it had forced upon him. "What are you thinking about?" Claire asked, her voice soft. Matt smiled, taking her hand in his. "How glad I am to be here." The past was a closed chapter. The future, however, was his to write.